The Four Horsemen build theme for July 31st is outer space. My build for this theme is based on the Hot Wheels Harry Hauler. For a previous build, I created a hearse based on the Harry Hauler casting. During that build, I had made silicone molds of all of the parts of the Harry Hauler so that I could resin cast copies if I wanted to build additional Harry Hauler based customs without sacrificing original red lines. I would begin this build with a couple sets of those resin castings. As a part of the hearse build, I had sculpted a new streamlined roof using 2-part epoxy putty to enclose the bed area where the massive engine had resided. This build would use castings taken from a mold of that roof as well. I was never quite satisfied with the original Harry Hauler interior. To me it seemed like the designers had kind of phoned it in. For this build, I designed and 3D printed a new, more detailed interior that included a passenger seat. I was very pleased with the way my new interior looked when placed in the Harry Hauler body, and now there was room for a passenger. The first modification to the body was to make some room for an additional rear axle, as this Mars rover was going to be a 6-wheeler. The entire rear fender and tail section of a second Harry Hauler body was grafted onto my first body. A block of particle board and some double-face tape were used as a jig to keep this square during the operation. Holes were drilled and small brass pins were glued in place to reinforce the joint between the two body sections. Gaps in the body joint were filled and smoothed using catalyzed glazing compound. The excess brass reinforcing pins were ground away, and strips of styrene were used to further strengthen the joint. The base was also extended using the rear portion of a second base. The lengthened base was reinforced using strips of styrene, and the axle holes were filled in. Gaps in the joints were filled and smoothed using catalyzed glazing compound. The build was temporarily mocked up using some styrene strip and the selected wheels and tires to determine the desired ride height. The custom wheels used in the build were purchased on eBay. With the ride height determined, suspension components were designed, 3D modeled, and then printed. The 3D printed suspension components were attached to the base and the axle tubes were added. The build was temporarily mocked up again to verify the ride height. I decided the Rover would need an observation dome somewhere on its roof, so I designed and 3D printed a plug I could use to vacuum form the dome from clear sheet plastic. The molded dome was then tinted using fabric dye to achieve a goldish color, as I intended to use a yellow tinted windshield and I wanted the dome to match. To cut the dome at the desired height, I created a small jig from sheet styrene and glued a fresh hobby knife blade to it. By carefully rotating the dome while it contacted the tip of the blade, I slowly cut through the plastic of the dome. To attach the dome to the Rover, I designed and 3D printed a mounting collar that I could attach to the roof of the Rover. After determining where I wanted the dome to be placed on the roof, I drilled a hole and attached the mounting collar. The custom 3D printed grille from the Harry Hearse build would also be used on the Rover. Additional 3D printed parts used in this build included a 2-piece pivoting communications antenna, custom saddle tanks, and custom taillight surrounds. I decided that the Rover should be named after one of my favorite Looney Tune characters, Marvin the Martian, so I included his likeness in the vehicle markings. I also intended to use decals to simulate roof-mounted solar panels. The custom decals used in the build were created in Corel Draw and then printed on my Canon laser printer. To finish it off, I added a little bit of weathering in the form of some orange Martian dust. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked the build.